Welcome to another episode of 22 at the Lips. I'm your podcast host, Alexis Hardwick, and this is the podcast from EMS providers to EMS providers and healthcare providers and anybody and everybody in between. What do you mean by that, Alexis? I'm glad you asked. Whether you work in EMS, whether you don't work in EMS and you're in the healthcare setting, or you're just the everyday, average, random bystander who does what we deem as the ambulance dance, when we start pulling up, waving your hands, it really is helpful sometimes. But anyways, and you're just interested in what we do and how we work and whatnot, welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you've been here from day one, you already know the get-go, but I started this podcast with the intent of finding interesting people in this field, and there's a whole lot of them, positive and negative connotations. But today is one of the positive connotations. I do want to give a little side note. This is round 2 of recording this episode. It is still recording, but last time I recorded with my guest for today, I did not hit the record button. And I don't know if it's fate. I don't know if it's the universe saying that today was going to be better. I don't know, but I do know that my gracious guest agreed to do a round 2. And today we have Peter Eastwick, but like I told Peter, I was like, dude, this isn't the first time. This is that part. Anyways, I'm going to let him introduce himself, because once he starts talking, everyone's going to be a lot more invested in him than me, and that's fine. But Peter, if you want to tell the people who you are, what you stand for, your background, your story of how you got into EMS, how long you've been doing this, my guy, the floor is yours.
G'day, how are you all? Like I said, my name's Peter. As you can tell by my accent, I am not from America. I'm actually an Australian paramedic that have come over here and working with Acadian Ambulance. They graciously brought me over. They're trying to recruit more Australians. So any Australian paramedic listening to this, if you're in Australia, look them up, come over. It's quite an interesting experience over here in America. It's a lot of fun. Good bunch of people to work for. And the fellow paramedics are really good to deal with. So a bit about myself. As I said, I came into EMS late in my life. I did car parts and helicopter stores and everything for 26 years before starting down on my paramedic journey. As some people are aware, in Australia, to become a paramedic, we go to university. It's a university degree. So you have to study that for 3 years before you start trying to get a job in the EMS field. Acadian brought me over because I worked out that we got more graduates coming out of universities than we have jobs. And over here in America, there's a lot more jobs than people wanting to do paramedics. So over I came and I brought my family over. So, yeah, and here we are. So I've been a paramedic now for 4 years. Basically started my journey on road with Acadian after all my study. But I have messed around with first aid, medical things for most of my life. As a young person, I started in an organization called Surf Lifesaving, which is over in America. You could look at as being in the lifeguards. I started that as what we call a nipper. That's where you're a young kid learning surf safety. Went right up through the ranks to where I was a training officer for a club for a number of years in the 90s, and later on got back in with my family doing it. And then I was in an organisation called State Emergency Service in Australia, which we assist in disasters. We assist the emergency services, so we have to have all our first aid knowledge, how to rescue people. I was in a subgroup which we did called vertical rescue, which was jumping off cliffs, which was a lot of fun. That's actually how I met my wife. Funny story with that one. She actually has dropped me off the cliff, over the cliff. So, and I still married her. And then there's also an organisation called St. John's Ambulance, which they do the sporting events and everything. All these things that I was doing in Australia when I was younger, leading right up to, was all volunteer. You don't get paid for it. It's all voluntary. So I've done a lot of stuff with them over the years. So that was where I got my love into first aid and medical knowledge and everything. And then the opportunity presented itself late in life to go to university, and the rest is history, as they say. And here I am working. So, yeah.
I feel like because we both kind of have not a similar backstory. Like, I mean, I've never been on the edge of a cliff, thankfully, but no, like the idea of going into like paramedicine and EMS kind of, I mean, a little later in life. I personally, like, I was teaching high school English, worked at a law firm, realized on day 3 out of my 3 months there that I didn't want to do it, because I looked at the lady that was training me and I was like, we jumped off this 3rd floor. Do you think it would kill us? And she was like, are you okay? I was like, I don't think I'm made for this. But haha.
Oh yeah.
But kind of going from like that general, like you have a different-ish background and then you jump into it. I feel like, you know, granted, maybe there are some things that don't carry over. Like, I don't use my English degree. Sorry, Dad. But you have a lot of different life skills and stuff that translate over, and you can kind of use that in different aspects into the job.
Yes, yeah. And I will say, you've got to have, going into paramedics, I've always said paramedics is a calling. It's not a job that anybody can do if you want to last in the industry. It's more of a calling than anything else. It takes a toll on your body and your mind overdoing it. If you're not wanting to do it and not like a calling, then it's definitely going to take a big history. Going into it later in life, I think it gave me a lot. I had a lot of life experience behind me. I think some people coming in at young ages they can suffer with it, with the mental illness side of things a little bit, because they don't have some of the life experiences behind them with what we deal with. But yeah, I do agree with you on that. I think it's a lot of interesting having those other backgrounds, those other interests and experiences has made me appreciate the job a lot more, and how to deal with people in the industry, like our family, things like that over the times. How to approach some of the people with it, because working over a wide range of meeting from spare parts in the car industry and everything, meeting people through that, dealing with people from there, led me into this. So it does make it an advantage, I think, in some of it. But in some of the other thing is my body is not as subtle as some of the easier to get around to some of the younger ones and everything. And I'm like, hey guys, I can't walk quite as fast as you. My knees don't like that. They're a bit sitting in a vehicle, getting out of a vehicle. Sometimes it's like, it takes me a little bit to get going because I'm feeling it in the knees. So being younger in this industry has its advantages as well. Some days, it's a bit of a struggle to get going if I've been parked up for a little while waiting for a call. It's the old knees don't want to work too well, or if I'm spending too long on the floor, it's like, now I've got to try and get up. Hang on, somebody want to just give me a helping hand up? These old bones don't want to get up too easily with it. So it is that. But again, everybody brings their own unique things to the table in paramedicine with it. So being older, being younger, as I said, different have their advantages, disadvantages. Then I see it, my role also with being as an older person coming into it, helping the younger ones coming through, giving them pointers, what I've learned over the years from the different industries of how to make sure they are looking after themselves in their mind and their body, helping them, making sure that they are taking the steps that they need to be given longevity in this job, because no one wants to see, they are the future of the industry with them coming in, and you want to keep them in the industry for as long as they can.
Absolutely.
So.
And I think back to not even 3.5 years ago, there was a call, long story short, I did chest compressions for 40 minutes straight. Bro, I can't, I'll be 30 in a year and a half, and I don't think I can do it now. And I'm, oof.
No, my body would like my body would give out well until after 3 minutes. I reckon. Now, this body is not supple enough. Through all my younger age things of like surf life saving in Australia and everything, I've bashed my body pretty hard over the time. Been doing a lot of those things, like going out body surfing, like as I said in surf life saving, I've gone out in cyclonic conditions, out in the water, body surfing, catching 6 foot, 2 meter high waves,
Jesus Christ.
Getting bashed into them, and then going out doing that, 3 or 4 times. And to like give you an idea of what the conditions were like with that, was we walked up the beach for close to about a mile, bit under a mile up the beach before we started to swim out. And by the time we got through all the breaking waves and everything, because there was actually 4 sets of waves breaks we had to get through to get out to the back, we were back to where we'd started. The sweep and everything, the water,
oh dear God,
pushed us out. So and then I was body surfing, and the people on the beach would see an arm would be seen through the water, and then a leg would be seen, and then they'd see me pop up and you'd go, oh, there he is, and I'd turn around and go back out and catch another one. So I have given my poor old body a bit of a flogging over the time for my age. So some things I do feel now, which I kind of regret some of those younger things at my age now, but it's all good. We're having it's still holding together. Hello, we just got a crew walking in, so
you're good. So tell me, okay, we in the United States, and I don't know, I feel like other places, but we have the system that is, you start off, you can get your EMR, do what you got to do, but typically, and 9 times out of 10, you will go through an EMT course, and sometimes it's maybe just a handful of months. Sometimes there are accelerated courses, you can take it a few weeks, whatever, but you have your EMT, maybe you get your advanced EMT, and then you have your paramedic, which is like a year and some change. However, like you went the route, and I'll show you and stuff, they have the paramedic degree, which is a whole, you go through a whole college course. Like you have a certificate, piece of paper, academia, university level. How is that? I mean, there is a big difference, but do you feel like it kind of put you at an advantage because, granted, we spent enough time to do all the aspects, the subjects, the cardio, pharmacology, 1 day of psych, respiratory, the whole kit and caboodle of all the things, special populations, OBGYN. Meanwhile, we're also doing your ER clinicals and OR clinicals, if that's what you do, your ride times on the ambulance, all that stuff. How does that look like for y'all? Because it is a lot of information. Do you feel like you retain more? Do you feel like you went more in depth in some areas?
I think, yeah, and it's a really interesting concept. So I wasn't aware. So with Acadian looking at bringing over Australians and everything, they did an analysis into the difference in the training between the two setups. They found it's about a 93-94% match up between what Australian paramedics learn in university and what American paramedics learn in their courses and everything. So what we're theoretical in that sense, we're learning the same. I think my way of understanding and the best way to do it with it, because I didn't say before that I am actually now a registered paramedic in Australia and in America. So even though when we come over to America here, we still have to go through a modified program, the same as what the Americans have to do. We have to sit a number of exams with them and do all the same sorts of things to get the same qualifications, their associate diploma or their technical diploma over here, the same. and sit the National Registry exam. So we have to do all those things to be registered over here. So I am dual registered now in 2 countries.
Congrats.
I find it interesting. But getting back to the training side, in Australia, we don't have EMTs. We don't go down that route. So all our emergency vehicles in Australia are run by our state. Most of them are run by the state governments. They're part of our health departments and things like that. They are double stack paramedics. So, and also the other difference, big notable difference is in Australia, your paramedics go out onto the call, a crew, that's who turn up at the call. We don't get fire departments turning up like you do over here. That was a real eye opener when I come over here, and next thing here's all these firefighters turning up, and you're running a car. You're not having to do all the compressions because you've got firefighters there helping out.
It's so nice.
It's so nice. So in that sense, Australians, so when they go into university, you're going in, you have to, in Australia, and that's one notable difference. I was actually talking to my wife about it today coming here. Notable in Australia, a lot of places we do these things called first aid certificates, which is you go in, you learn how to do slings, how to bandage, how to treat snake bites, which is a big thing in Australia, and marine stings and spider bites and all the animals, how to treat deadly animals bites. You learn how to do CPR. You learn strokes, how to assess for a stroke briefly, sort of thing. So you learn all these sorts of skills, and most businesses, if they're over a certain size, I think it's over about 10 employees, have to have somebody on their staff that has done a first aid certificate. So we have that side of things. So when we come, then everybody that goes into the paramedic program, from my understanding, has to have done a first aid certificate to go in to have that. So we have that little bit of basic knowledge. We spend the rest of the time in the certificate, in the degrees. You learn the theories, but we're also running scenarios all the time. Sorry, we're at the station, we're attached to a hospital, so we've got the nurses coming in as well. So you might hear some a little bit in the background. Don't mind a little bit of noise.
Station aesthetics.
Yeah.
Station ASMR.
It's the easiest way to go. Easiest place to do it all. So back onto my training on the thing. So we learned I was fortunate with my university that they were very forward thinking, and I hope they are still forward thinking with it, was they weren't just training us to what the Australian requirements were. We were learning other skills like over here, because in Australia we can't do intubation as our base metal paramedics. That's a higher level paramedic skill. But we were taught those skills because as our university said, they didn't know where we were going to end up. A number of their graduates went over to England to work. Some went, I think some might have gone to Canada. I've come over here to the US with a few other people. I believe some are now looking, maybe going into New Zealand as well, working with the whole program. So they were looking at they were trying to teach us not just for Australia, but also worldwide, like other skills and everything like that. So I was fortunate that way. So I believe we have a deeper theoretical knowledge on, and not so much in the basics of paramedicine and everything like that, and how the pathophysiology. We have a deeper theoretical knowledge on how protocols come about, what academic research, how to do academic research, how to drive that to change your protocols to improve what we do in the field for evidence-based practice, which is what where paramedicine is going with how we come up with our protocols and everything like that we work in the field with and use. So we have a slightly, that's my big thing that I see, but probably between the two is I think American paramedics have a slightly better clinical knowledge, better slightly clinical skills when they first starting off, because you guys do a lot more here that I've seen with Acadian, a lot more clinical days training, like in going in and being on trucks, in the hospitals. I never went into a hospital to do any of my clinical training in the hospitals. But however, on the flip side of that, that we did a lot of scenario-based training. So sometimes I see that our assessments to some of them are a little bit more, I wouldn't say refined, but going back to some of those assessments where because we've done over a period of time, we're constantly doing those sorts of assessments, getting those drummed into us, that they come second nature. So as we're walking into a scene, we're seeing all these things. Over here with some of the training it is there, but it's not always second nature because it wasn't ingrained in the scenarios in university land, as I call it. Basically, they learning some of the on-road we call them bad habits.
Yeah, but 100%
things. So they don't always think, which is good, which is bad. I don't think there's much difference between it. It's slightly two different systems, but we have a better. I won't say either better because I think everybody gets to the same point. I think, however, sometimes some of the American paramedics sometimes could be a little bit more just protocol driven, and not clinical, not doing clinical judgments, clinical thinking, thinking about different things. That's probably the one. But again, after a few years in experience, everybody's at the same level, same spot, because we all, as I say, we get the bad habits, we get different things. But I do love the American system of going into the hospitals and doing a number of clinicals in hospitals, because they get to, like, I'll be the first to admit, one of the big things for me was lung sounds. Trying to pick some of them up, because you can only hear so much really well listening on a computer speaker generated lung sound, right. Not hearing them in the field.
Yeah.
If in the hospital working with respiratory therapists and everything like that, you can really hear and asking them questions about what they're hearing, so you're understanding the differences. I think could have been a big thing. We're caught up now and everything like that, but that's some of the little differences I see in the things. I do like the hospital side of the setups, but we do go on the road. I was fortunate enough, in one way with me was I had to do a week in a nursing home. So I found that beneficial, because I got to see what happens in the nursing home, how difficult it can be getting, understaffed. So I do appreciate with some of the nursing home staff that a lot of them are working very hard. They're looking after a large number of people with a very, very small amount of staff to do it. So I do get appreciation with nursing homes. cleaning up urine and brushing teeth was not an experience. And I realized then that I could never work in a nursing home at all.
Dude,
a week was long enough for me, and I was pleased when that week was over. Because I was like, nope, after the first day, I'm like, nope, this is not the place for me at all. And I soon realized that I could not do nursing.
Ooh, no.
No, nursing was not for me. I need something different. So it is as I said, a slightly different way of going about things. We all come to the same points. I think it's just sometimes I understand how protocols come about a little bit better, so I look at trying to improve. So that's but that's also where I'm interested in going down the line into training and into improving paramedicine, trying to help improve our protocols if we need to.
Absolutely. It's kind of an interesting take, because like we're taught, from day one of EMT. I'm pretty sure, I know I was given, but like you're given like the NREMT checklist, and you have your NREMT level assessment, and like from day one, you're going to have to take the national registry and you're going to have to pass it. And it's going to be no longer, but your skills and your written part. And so it's kind of drilled in you from the get-go of like, this is how you pass registry, and everything is not taught. I mean, it's taught to registry level, but you always have like those moments where like, well, this isn't on registry, but you should know this, blah, 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 blah. So kind of on the assessment side, I mean, it's a running joke and it'll always be here, but any callers, BSI, stay safe. So,
yeah, and with doing some of the training that I've been getting involved in, the training side over here, that is one of the things I like. It sort of irks me a little bit, like to a point, because to me, there's not enough of the scenarios in, so we can part. They get taught to what needs to be done to get through national registry to a point, but then there's also the other little things happening, like so with every subject that was paramedicine training side of things, because you do your pathophysiology and your physiology and your anatomy and of course and everything like that. But any subject that was further resigned to with paramedics in mind had scenario exams in there. So we had to, so while you're sort of learning, but you had to go through all those things. And like in my final semester, we had like 5 weeks of scenarios where we were marked on one and we had to assist in another one. We were primary on one call, secondary officer on another call to help. But on our primary one, if we made 2 errors, that was a 0 and we failed that scenario.
Oof.
And if you failed 2 scenarios out of those 5, you failed the subject. You couldn't recover. I got for one of mine and it was very simple, was I didn't actually do a drug check with my partner. So it was hypoglycemia. I never got him to actually check the expiry and that I was going to give glucose medication. I did it in my head. I thought I'd done it to the patient with my partner, but I actually didn't do it. Now, that's one thing, over here we're working as a single officer in the back of the truck or whatever. You can't really do all those drug checks. In Australia, that's a big thing. You get your partner to double check your drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it. That cost me 50% of that scenario mark. So instead of getting, I think I was on track to get like 85, 90% for that scenario, I only got 50% for that scenario. Jeez. So it really made you focus on, and like one of my weeks that we did was one subject was just on clinical assessment. So that was where we had to learn, for our first block of assessment, we had to learn 4 assessments, and it wasn't like just one page of stuff. It was 8 pages of stuff going through, right, because we had to start right at the fingernails, looking at what the fingernails was, if there was clubbing of the fingernails, and what that meant, going right up the arm, looking at the skin, if there was any petechiae or anything of notes on the skin, up in the eyelids to see if there's anemia, and then what that meant, looking right through, going through the chest, listening to lung sounds, how you did it all, what you're looking for, feeling for the chest for equal rise, equal expansion. Neuro was even getting them up to walk and what the gait was meant and things like that. And that was all marked by we had actual ER doctors examining us on that.
No pressure.
It was kind of like to the doctor's level. And I really hated that subject. I won't deny it, because it was going through memorizing this whole thing and explaining and then saying what if we found some of the things, what those conditions sort of meant. But I will say that thank God for that subject.
Yeah.
When I got onto the road and got out and over here working by myself, those assessments have saved my life, my stuff. I've picked stuff up because of that, because we did them over and over and over and over again. Like even feeling through the joints for crepitus in a lot of them and everything. So learning those sorts of skills meant, and that when I'm walking into the doors, I'm automatically listening for lung sounds, even if without a stethoscope, if I can hear them, I start going, well, now it's getting really serious, and things like that. So those sorts of things sort of made me better, which that was just me and that was just my university. Other universities may not do those sorts of levels of things, but I certainly was very thankful for my lecturer and tutorers with that subject now, and I've never actually told them that, but if they listen to this, they'll know about it. I've been very thankful and thought, man, I was so pleased that they did that for me. So, it's certainly an interesting way of going about different things. And we spent 13 weeks, like you said, you had 1 week of mental health over here. We had 13 weeks. That was just one subject. Not that I think it made me any better,
right?
or understanding it, but when we ran a scenario, we actually had mental health nurses come in and actually play the parts so that we could actually get real life experience and work through it, which was very beneficial. Like, it made me a lot better, understanding how to deal, and a little bit of background of understanding some of the things that are happening with them and everything, of how, and it was more focused, a lot was on how to talk to the people on scene. And I have noticed that a lot of the sheriff deputies and some of the and firemen that I deal with quite often, they said that they can't figure out how I interrelate with these people reasonably well. And I think it's just some of those things a little bit more fortunate that way. But I also seen that with some of the paramedics and EMTs over here, they deal with those patients very, very well as well, and relate with them very well as well, because they've had so many contacts with them over the time. They've developed those skills. So I think the way Australia do it, because we don't have the EMT, we don't have all the private ambulance services run by the state governments, and everything like that. Like, doing all those scenarios, we gain that experience where we don't do it. Where over here, you're doing it more on your clinical rides in the trucks, actually on the ride with the crews. So
dude, that's what, it was so, I don't want to say earth shattering in a negative connotation, but one of the biggest moments I can think back to in paramedic school was the importance of my instructor was like, hey guys, just so you know, if you haven't realized it by now, but when you're done, you could be the sole provider, the actual sole ALS provider in your system. And I'm in the calls you run and stuff like that. And that was a big light bulb moment of oh my God, I'm going to be stuck with an EMT. And then it's also I have a great partner, but hoping that they're good. I mean, because even still, I have a good partner, but we'll be on the way to a call. And I mean, it was a hot minute ago, but there was a call where we're on the way to the hospital. My patient's I feel nauseous. I'm okay, let me grab you some Zofran. Thankfully, we have our 5, 6, 7, 100 rights of medication checks, but I just grabbed the green cap vial and I'm okay, Zofran, and I'm drawing it up, and it hit me. I'm oh my God, this is not, I'm drawing up. I'm where is my milliliters? This is too much. I'm drawing up norepinephrine, oh dear God. So
yeah.
Obviously, I corrected myself, but ooh, how do you explain that one?
Rule number 1: if your patient says they're nauseous, grab an emesis bag first. Don't worry about that. I nearly wore it the other day because I didn't do it that way. I spread my feet very, very quickly. So rule number 1: if they say they're starting to feel nauseous, grab the emesis bag first. But yes, you are right on that with the medication. I have done the same thing, and it's only because it got drilled into us to check the medication, that I actually have pulled them out. And I'll pull out the one I think, and then I'll actually physically read it and double check it. Because it got handed into me so much. So yes, I totally agree with you. You're in the back of the truck. You're the only one there, and sometimes you get on scene and at a car accident, the next thing you've got 7 patients. You're now the only one trying to, and all the and the fire are there and everything, but they're looking at you to make all the medical decisions, because now you're the senior one there, and it's it starts getting information overload, and you start trying to, where do I start, and until more people start rolling up and more paramedics rolling up to take over. But yes, that was a big culture shock over here, and my rude awakening was on my very first shift when I cleared as a paramedic. My very first call by myself was a lady that was seizing, and she was 400 pounds.
Awesome.
And she was completely unresponsive, and I'd given her the medication, and her blood pressure was tanking.
Awesome.
And we were the only people there on scene.
Love it.
We had to try and get her out and onto the stretcher. And don't ask me how me and my EMT partner did it, but we managed to do it. And of course, then the sheriff and deputies turned up just as we always happened just as we got it done. But you are right. Over here, I cannot speak highly enough of my paramedic, my EMT partner.
Yeah.
And as I say to them on my trucks, we make up the paramedic team.
Right.
Because I rely on them for a lot of stuff. Well, I rely on my partner even to do interpretations for me and be a translator both ways, because with my accent, as you know, some of the elderly people do not understand a thing that I'm saying or my terminologies that I come out with, because apparently I come out with Australian terms when I'm not thinking, when I'm working hard.
Yeah.
Without even thinking, like I will start saying to my partner, we'll go to the gas station, to the servo, and he looks at me and he goes, the gas station? And yeah, okay, the gas station. Servo. Well, after this ute, we're right to turn, and he's looking at me. So he's starting to learn my Australianism. So a ute for everybody out there is what you guys call a pickup over here. In Australia, we call it a ute. Short for a utility vehicle.
Okay.
Came from the farmers. I always play a joke on the Americans to tell them it's because you can throw 2 ewes in the back of the sheep, which ewes, everyone knows are sheep.
Yeah.
So you can throw 2 sheep in the back and go, bam. No, it started off way back in the 50s. The farmers wanted a vehicle that they could work on the farm in during the week and go to church on Sundays in like a comfortable vehicle to go to church on Sundays in. So the car manufacturers put a sedan front with a tray on the back, and they called it a utility. And of course, Australians, we have to shorten everything.
Right.
So we got to bring it. So we shorten it to a ute. So everything in Australia, anything with a tray on the back that's 4-wheel drive or in the pickup side, smaller pickups, is called a ute. Because as I said, we shorten everything. So, in Australia, we don't call it McDonald's or Mickey D's. No, that's Macca's. You're going off to do a Macca's run.
Okay.
Or so you'll hear Australians say, "Oh, I'm just going to go to Macca's via the servo." Means you're going to the McDonald's and you're going to the gas station to fill up with your car. So, and the other one we do is we put O's on a lot of the end of the name. So it's John O, Dave O. That's nicknames. We'll shorten anything because we use that. We use acronyms a lot. Because I find one of the funny things over here was I had a gentleman with some chest pain and everything, and I had to ring a report in. We'd given the gentleman, a number of sprays of what do we call it over here? Nitro.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in Australia we call it GTN. We don't call it nitro.
Okay.
It's GTN.
Okay.
So I've run the nurse up on the phone and I've told them who we are, and I said I've given them 6 sprays of GTN. And she's gone, what?
What?
After about the 5th time of repeating that I've given 6 sprays of GTN, and I look at my preceptor because I was doing precept in my clearance right. He's absolutely sitting in the chair, wetting himself with laughter. Mate, let me dig this deep hole and not coming to help me at all. No. I then looked at him and I've gone and worked out and I've gone, oh, what the hell do you call it over here? Nitro. So then I told her nitro and she's gone, oh, okay. Now, so it's certainly been, that's where I say my partner's had to do a number of translations
100%.
And interpreting for me because some of the accents that I get back as well, I'm struggling to understand what the person is saying. And I look at my partner, and when he gives me a blank look back, I know we're in trouble.
Oh, no.
We definitely have a big communication problem going with the accents going. So it makes it an experience with that side of things. But we have a bit of we generally get on with them, and we have a good laugh with the patients. Once we start getting to understand each other, we have a good laugh. And
dude, I don't know what I would do if I thought one of my loved ones was like having, okay, let's say I call because hopefully never, but like I think I'm having a stroke, and the paramedic gets there and they have an accident, dude, I would just be like, you know what? It's positive signs. Like, just take me in, man.
Yep. And then I get them where they just want me to keep talking to them because they love my accent and they just want to hear it all the time. And like,
dude, no offense to my mom, but that would be my mom 100%. I don't know if she's gonna listen. She's gonna be like, "That's me," but that would be like, "Your accent, oh my god."
Yes, I do get that. I get a lot of interesting times with accent with some of the responses, and some of the ladies, they absolutely fall in love with it. And they ask me if I'm married and everything. So yeah, some of the ones from the nursing home get a little bit funny with it. But yes, with some of the news from there.
Did you say?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I tell people now, because everybody laugh, and I do have an Australian patch on my shirt to show the company has done it, given us patches with the Australian flag on it to let people know. But I just tell people now that I'm from way southern Louisiana, like 20 hours flight south, and then they finally start working out that I'm not from Louisiana at all. Although some people do believe me when I've said it, that I'm from way southern Louisiana. They go, "Oh yes, okay, yes." And my my preceptor, when I was going through with the training, he had one of the local ER to where I was at the time, absolutely convinced that I was from a southern Louisiana town, and which was made it really funny was because I was the third Australian to be going to them at the time of the training, and he'd gone each a little bit south further with each person, and when he got to me, I was root deep, and they believed it. Like, for 2 days, they believed that I was from and couldn't work it. And yes, so we had them going. So it was we do have a bit of fun with my accent with people, and everything. So it gets a bit of a fun. And everybody asks me if we're in Australia, if we have the big spiders. That's the most common question I get.
I'm not gonna lie. I was going to ask what the biggest spider you've seen was, because
the biggest one I've seen was, we called him Harry. He was our family pet. And he was the size of a small dinner plate. And he would live up on our dining room wall.
Absolutely not.
He was a huntsman. He is harmless. He's a nice big. My son actually, back in Australia, he's a commercial electrician, putting elevators into high rises and everything. And he says he hates those huntsmen because they sit there judging you. They just look at you all day in the elevator shafts. They sit there and judge you. But in Australia, you don't have to worry about the big spiders. They won't harm. They won't harm you so much. It's the little spiders that you got to worry about. The little redbacks and everything, they get into your shoes. So in Australia, if you haven't worn your shoes for a day or two, you're best to give them a knock and a tap and have a look in there to make sure there's no creepy crawly has climbed in them. You don't leave them outside on your front porch or anything like that. You'll have something climb into it during the night. But you just got to remember, everything will kill you in Australia. So, even plants, like the plant, we've got deadly plants. Well, they won't kill you. But where I grew up, we had a lovely little plant it was called the Gimpy bush, and it's also known as the suicide bush. Because it's got this, and it was back really when the pioneers come in the area and everything. It's this lovely broadleaf plant leaf, really nice and broad, great for using for a toilet stop, except it's covered in these really fine stinging nettles, fibers, and they don't. Once they go into you, you constantly have pain until they fully work their way out, which can be up to 3 months later.
Oh my God!
And of course, you can imagine what the pioneers did with that. And then we're in a certain anatomy area of their body. It has no reported human deaths, but animals have been known when they've been brushed up onto them and been stung and everything, that they have, done things to, harm themselves and everything because of the pain. It's just from the pain. So we have so that was in the area we were around. So you just left those bushes. You didn't try and touch those those leaves, because they were covered in the fine little needle hairs, and you get a good lot of pain with that. And you go to the beach, and of course you got your sharks. Everybody knows about our lovely friendly sharks that just
The
like
jellyfish. The box jellyfish.
Box
I
jellyfish.
watched a documentary. I'm pretty sure it was from the Bondi Beach. But
Bondi Rest, I do miss the beach. I do miss my beaches over here. Louisiana just yeah, they don't have beaches.
Why is the water brown?
Yeah, or green.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do miss my beaches. But you know, yeah, of course the sharks come up and they have a nibble on a surfer every now and then, and everything. But that's all right. And the box jellyfish. Funny thing is, they won't go down. They aren't down in Bondi. Box jellyfish is.
Oh, really?
Yep, they are only to the northern waters of Queensland, up along the top parts of Queensland. They don't go down to Bondi. That's too cold for them down there. Box jellyfish are very interesting and very smart. I don't know if it's true, but I was watching a documentary on them, and they work out. They live in some of the streams. So they'll come out in summertime. In wintertime, they hibernate up in the streams and you don't even know they're there. And then they'll come out and they just follow the coastline. So if you go off into the islands off, like the Whitsundays is an area up there with the Great Barrier Reef, the islands off the coastline, there's no box jellyfish out in the islands. It's too far out. They only follow the coastline down and they stay in the more warmer northern waters. They'll come down about halfway down Queensland. Paramedics have it on board there. Also, they carry 5 litres of vinegar, and that's not to add to your chips, your hot chips over in there. That's to pour on the stings when they happen, because that will degrade it. We down in my area, because I was down in the Brisbane area, the southeast corner and everything, we got the Portuguese man of war, or the blue bottle we call them, because they're blue and they got a little bottle type air sac on them.
Oh, okay.
They give you a nasty sting that people will have anaphylaxis reactions to them, of course. But you put them under a warm shower, fresh shower, wash it all off, and then once you've got all the nettles off them, then the stinger off them, you can put some ice on the whelps. Pretty good. We got another little one that's called the U.S.A. It's about the size of a small fingernail. You can't see it in the water.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I believe it has. People have died from that sting because of the pain. It gives you a lot of overriding pain. Yeah, so that's a little bit of fun with that one. Not that I've just got that. And then you've got, in rocky areas, we've got a stonefish that's you step on that because it looks like a stone. You don't realize it. That ruins your day, but stick their foot in a bucket of hot water and they'll have instant relief. But as soon as you pull it out, they'll be in pain. And unfortunately, I'll say pain relief, fentanyl and everything won't touch the pain. The only hot water will do the trick. It's quite funny about that. So it's an interesting. So yeah, that's some little thing, fun and games with that. And then you got the birds attack you, like we got our friendly magpies, little birds at nesting time. So in Australia, if you see these people cycling around and they've got their bike helmets on and they've got these big long cable ties hanging off and in a hedgehog position, don't worry, that's only to protect them from the birds. Because magpies come in and they swoop, they'll come down and they'll hit your ears and your helmet. I've been hit by them, and of course, kids get scared with them and they get hit and they fall off their bikes, so they get hurt that way. I've been hit my ear, made it bleed when they hit, because they come in, they swoop in and hit you from behind, so you don't hear them coming until you get the whack on the back of the head. Or the side of the head, which is where you have the accident, because you don't realise, and of course then you fall off your bike.
Oh, naturally, yeah.
Riding a push bike along. So, and they'll attack people walking and everything. But we put, we take precautions. You'll go and put a sign up. Locals will know that there's magpie nesting and swooping. They'll tack a sign up, say, "Hey, there's a swooping magpie here." But so then the cable ties make them so they hit the cable ties before they hit you, and that stops them from hitting you. So that's why we have these bike helmets with these big long hedge cable ties hanging off them. So it's quite a funny little. You'll see it's riding along, but eyes don't work. But they've worked out that eyes don't work to drawing eyes on the back of the helmet. It doesn't work to do all those things. So yeah,
I will forever stand by my statement, and I'm just going to leave it at this. One, birds aren't real, but also they're evil. One of the things I want to bring up is you had talked about how, like, as far as the scope of practice and whatnot, intubations, and we had talked previously, which was never recorded, about EJs and IOs and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
But another thing is you guys have the whistle, which if you watch Bondi Beach, you can see the whistle, and I think that's incredible.
Oh, our green whistle, my favorite medication. I wish I'd miss my green whistle.
Dude,
I love it.
The patient administers it to themselves. There's no like you have to watch for their blood pressure intensely and like already. Dude, and then I mean I'm not saying that I don't stand by the statement that like if I give you fentanyl on the Ambulamp, you're gonna be addicted for the rest of your life. Don't work like that. But still, like the risk of addiction is so minimal. And
yeah. So to give people an idea with the green, like when I came over here, I found it very interesting. We've got pain relief, fentanyl, ketamine.
Yeah.
In Australia, the standard paramedics, our basic paramedics, we can give the fentanyl. Ketamine is a what we call a critical care paramedic, our CCPs, ICPs. Those guys have done at least 2 years on road experience. They've done a Masters of Paramedicine, and they generally go off and have to do further training with their ambulance organisation as well, passing their level of qualification to become what they call our critical care paramedics out. And those guys, they are the guys that, as far as I understand now, they do the intubations, they do the IOs. Our standard paramedics don't do IOs, or that I believe is starting to change. They are the ones that can administer ketamine.
Mm-hmm.
They also, in some of them now, and our flight medics are starting to get fast ultrasounds on their portable ones and everything. They're on our helicopters. Our helicopters also over there in Queensland, where I'm from, they have emergency doctors on a trauma doctor on their helicopters and a flight paramedic, not a nurse like over here. But so yeah, we didn't have any intermediate sort of pain relief, a lower scale of pain relief that we can give. The green whistle, or as it's properly known as methoxyfluorine, it's a bit of a tongue twister, or Pentrain is the other name. That is really good for musculoskeletal pain. So if you have someone with a dislocation, I actually saw it happen in the hospital. A guy, football player, playing rugby, dislocated his shoulder. He sucked on the green whistle, and we took him up. He wouldn't pop back in the field. And of course we can't in Australia, in Queensland area, any dislocation, much like over here. Our hospitals have to reset it. We can't.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch it.
No, I'm not touching it either. But it didn't pop back in. He had dislocated a few times in previous. But he was sucking. So he was on the green whistle. We took him into the hospital. That's the whole pain relief he got the whole time. They just hung some bags of saline off his arm, had him laying flat on a bed, his arm hanging down. And they just, after a few minutes of him with that traction, they just popped it back in again. Mm-hmm. And within 20 minutes, he was heading back out to the football fields. Not to play, but
right,
But he'd done all that, and that was with the methoxyfluorine. Really good for musculoskeletal, young kids with broken bones and everything. You can give them that. And as we said, they self-administer it. So one of the requirements are they've got to be able to self-administer. Yeah. They've got to be able to hold on to it and suck on it on themselves. It's just like a whistle going in, and they just breathe it in. The biggest thing is that you've got to be aware of in it is when they're breathing that out. Of course, they're breathing that out, and you're in the back of a confined ambulance. You're inhaling that yourself.
Now everyone feels good.
So now we're all feeling good and happy. So there are some limitations. You're only allowed. So in Queensland, where I was from, you could only ever administer 2 vials of the drug per shift, like per paramedic. So whoever's in there, but pretty well much 2 vials, but that was it per shift, just so we didn't overdose anybody, unlike ourselves. They can put a little charcoal canister. There is a way you can put onto it, but of course, cost and everything. The ambulance service didn't want to spend the money for them or everyone.
Yeah.
But No, but your FDA over here won't approve that drug over here in America, which is a shame. It's been used very effectively in Australia and in the Europe now in Australia, I think for at least 30 odd years in the EMS setting.
Yeah.
It's a really, really good drug for that intermediate pain. The person goes chatty. If they've sucked on it too much, they fall asleep for about 30 seconds, maybe a minute, if that. And then they wake up and start talking your ear off again. You hear all sorts of wonderful stories from them. They have absolutely no idea. It was designed, I believe it was designed in Australia as a anesthetic for a anesthesia to be given. But they found it worked really well in the EMS setting, so that's where it's mainly used now. And yeah, certain people, like I was trained up into it in surf lifesaving, had to administer it and to use it and everything, extra qualifications with some of those things.
You're good. You're good.
So, as I said, we're in the hospital with crews and everything walking in, and they see us. So everybody says hello to us. So.
My podcast. Here.
Yeah.
Huh?
Are you talking?
Yep.
Yeah. I can go back and edit. You're good, sis. You're good. You're one of the ones I like. You're good.
Yeah. So adds in a little bit more, shows the authenticity of the podcast.
Again, station ASMR.
Yeah.
No, dude. And then I'm not. One, anytime. I mean, I believe any medication you give, you should be watching end title CO2. But anyways, even like with fentanyl, I'm having to watch the end title and like. Cool, the whistle, like you're having a little cat nap for 30 seconds. Cool. On fentanyl, if you start getting drowsy, I'm getting a little worried. Am I going to have to chase this with like a little dab of Narcan? And then isn't going to take away their pain, like the pain blocker completely?
Yeah. And that's, yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I'm the same, like on my last couple of shifts, I've had to give fentanyl out onto patients for, possible broken elbows, or all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
And things like that. And yeah, and especially when you get onto some of the elderly people and things like that, I have to, you're trying to manage their pain, but you're also watching to make sure that they're not getting overdosed. And you're right, you're watching the heart rate, you're watching the breathing rate, you're watching the end vitals, you start putting all the extra monitoring gear on, because that's all we've got to work with. And we've got to manage pain, because that's, if you don't, that starts causing problems to the body as well. And that's what people don't understand. And over here, before, that's the big thing. Like over here, before I can give them fentanyl, I've got to spend five minutes educating the person on how safe fentanyl is, because I've heard it in the media, and it is a little bit of a pet hate of mine, is they've heard it in the media, which has it, perfectly correct, and I'm not saying it's not, that fentanyl is such a bad drug and everything. What people have got to understand is these people that they're talking about have got absolutely no medical knowledge.
Yeah.
They do not have, there's no research into how much they're giving and what they're giving.
Yeah.
They're throwing it in from the doorway and going, well, we'll just add this amount in. So you've got no idea. I'm not saying fentanyl is not a safe drug, by all means. Like, you have to know what you're doing. We have protocols. We have amounts that we can give. We've got dosages, rates that we have to subscribe through. This is what's been medically researched. This is where we're saying, from evidence-based research. Academia has researched all this. There's been research done into it and said, okay, looking at this, if you give it this amount of this drug, it's like morphine and a lot of these other drugs. You give this amount, it's going to give a therapeutic range of care. It's not going to get addicted people. People aren't going to get addicted with the 1 or 2 amounts that we're giving them in the field or in the hospital if they're having it. Where people over the time have heard about the opioid addiction with medications, with fentanyl medications and things like that, is when they've been on it long term. We're talking long-term uses of these. In an acute case where we're in the hospital and we're giving you 1 or 2 doses, you might have had 2 or 3 doses in the hospital to manage your pain. And then that's all you're getting, for a couple of days. You're not, unless you're really, really susceptible to being addicted to it, you're not going to get addicted to those amounts that we give them. We're giving them in controlled amounts, and we have time periods when we can give the next dose and the next amount that we can give, and how much we give, and this is on all our medications that we carry. And as I say to people, even back in Australia, I was doing a presentation to some kids coming through, and we were showing the ambulances and everything. I was actually in university at the time going through, but I was helping out, and I was showing what was in a kit bag, and what drugs we use, and I used the term drugs to them. And teachers were coming up saying, "You can't use those terms, you can't." And I'm saying to them, "No, it is a drug." I'm saying to them, the difference between these drugs and the bad drugs we're talking about, out there is these drugs, we know how much we can give.
They're controlled.
They're controlled. And it's like, and I said to them, and I actually said to those teachers then, did they know what the most common overdose drug is that we use? And they went, no. And it's Tylenol and ibuprofen over here. You call it Tylenol. In Australia, we call it Panadol. Different brand names. Same stuff, different name. And
acetaminophen.
Yeah, I can't say that word. I'm sorry. When I first heard that, and that was in, it came out and said that to me, and I looked at her blankly, and I've gone,
"What is that?
What are you talking about?" And she's gone, and she said that acetaminophen, whatever. And I've gone, "What's that?" And she's come back to me and goes, "It's Tylenol." And I've responded back, "Oh, you mean Panadol? Why didn't you say Panadol?" It's like, what? She passed me on the court for that scenario. So
right.
That was pretty good.
You're checking your 5 rights of medications.
Yeah, that's right. I'm like, I have no idea what you were talking about. But I said, to him that was the most commonly overdosed because people don't follow the instructions.
Yeah. It's not candy.
It's not candy. You've got to follow those instructions are on there for a reason. Yeah. And this is what they have to take. And it's like, and when I started explaining that to them, they're like, oh, and I'm saying this in front of the kids as well. I'm saying, you guys have got to realize that this stuff, while it's safe to take because we know how much you can take and what's safe for your body to process in a time. This is why there's the time things on
and
there.
6 and hours only take this much.
Yeah, and everything. And I was like, they were like, so it's like you got to educate these people over here because I've just had it rammed into them that fentanyl is a bad drug. It's unsafe. And if you look at fentanyl, it's going to do bad things to you. And I'm like, no, it's not. And as I say to some people, and it's how I work with it is, I'll look at their age and their size and everything like that. And I might start on a slightly lower amount to make sure that the patient is responding okay with it. I am reducing. And as I say to people, I can always give them a bit more pain relief. I can't take it away. Yeah. So that's how I sort of work with it. But it's like, sometimes it's like, by the time I give you this pain relief, we'll nearly be at the hospital because I've had to try and educate you before I can give it to you. But I would really like to, and I can ease your pain and make it more comfortable for bouncing down these lovely, smooth Louisiana roads. Not.
Yeah.
I've never felt such rough roads, and I thought the roads in Australia were bad. And I lived in the centre of Australia where we had dirt roads that were corrugated and everything. But I have to say, the roads in Louisiana are worse.
The 22 at the Lips podcast is designed to support, not replace, the relationship that exists between a practitioner and his or her medical director. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host, guest, and not necessarily of Master Medics. The information provided during this podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for your approved protocols.